Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Zorro Natural Processed Panamanian Geisha from Corvus Coffee Roasters. And there's the tin right there. And going to show you the artwork of the tin because I think this is the most pretty coffee packaging I've seen this entire year. Blue and green are my two favorite colors, and I think that this is absolutely stunning. All right, Corvus, based out of Denver, Colorado, and they're a coffee roaster that has featured on the channel several times before, and they're a coffee roaster we're extremely familiar with as I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. And when I took my first job out of grad school, I had the opportunity to visit their cafe pretty much every single morning, and as a result, got very familiar with their coffee. That being said, haven't had too many of their offerings in recent years, and probably the biggest reason for that is a lot of their higher end offerings have been anaerobic coffees, and they've been alcohol forward, and as a result, not necessarily the biggest fan of the anaerobics, especially the alcoholic ones, so mostly steered clear until they released something that was very much my flavor profile. A lot of people know that Panamanian Geishas are my favorite coffee in the world, and the Zorro specifically is my second favorite coffee this year, as Manhattan did an amazing job with their Zorro. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Corvus's version of this same coffee might compare. This right here is day 17 of this coffee. And Corvus did have a recipe that was included when they offered this coffee on their website. It was a 17:1 water to coffee ratio. We brewed at 205 degrees Fahrenheit through the Chemex. Corvus is a light medium American for the roast profile. And let's start discussing a Panamanian Geisha. All right, day 7, our first impression, and we drank this one alongside the Estrebi. We have an Estrebi review that's going to be coming out in a couple days as well. But we preferred the Estrebi on the first day, and that's why this video is coming out first. Coffee didn't necessarily have the best first impression at the warmer temperatures. It was just pretty acidic, and that's pretty common with a lot of these Panamanian Geishas. The same thing happened with the Manhattan coffees, as we enjoyed them significantly more as they had cooled down. Pretty acidic coffee as a whole with a bit of sweet apple acidity, and as it had cooled down, it had gotten much better by the end. Day 9, quite a bit in this cup, and this is a very layered and complex cup of coffee. Pretty strong citrus-like acidity right at the start, likely a bit of both apple and lemon, so different acidity as well, different citrus acidity as well. Dark fruits as well as a great sort of punchy sweetness on this day, best as it has cooled down, as you're experiencing quite a bit of depth layering in this cup of coffee. Day 10, coffee remains really citrus fruit dominant, and that's pretty much the biggest theme throughout this cup of coffee. Could be a number of different fruits, but most reminiscent of apple acidity, especially on this day as well. Darker fruits too, including a heavy bit of darker stone fruits, and pretty good. Best day of the coffee to that point. Day 13, and we're going to be comparing it to the Estrebi quite a bit as well. Just like the Estrebi, this coffee is significantly better at cooler temperatures with a wider range of fruit flavors, becoming a little bit more pronounced at those lower temperatures. Pretty punchy and sweet, while not as sweet and punchy as the Estrebi, but definitely more citrus fruit forward. And then day 15, a surprisingly nice bit of dark sweetness in this cup. Could say probably some fair bit of caramel. And then there was a really nice, pretty apple acidity in the cup, and the coffee as a whole seems to be improving. And with those Manhattan coffees, we saw the window probably best between days 18 and day 23, a little bit later in the coffee. So there's entirely a chance that, given that this is day 17 and our last cup of this coffee probably could have improved even more if we had just waited a couple more days. Strong dominant citrus fruit in the cup as well, as it had cooled down yet again. Pretty nice, probably the best day until this day 17, which the coffee is even better on this day. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we were getting. All right, and the thing that will jump out is the citrus fruit at level 5, of course. The florals are really high, as this was a very floral cup of coffee. Can't believe we hadn't mentioned that in the notes, because obviously if it's this high on the tasting wheel, then there was more than a heavy bit of florals in the cup as well. Sweetness level 4. That's a level 5 today. And I think when we were making the tasting wheel, we were waffling back and forth between a 4.5, so between a 4 and a 5. But yeah, the sweetness on today is definitely a level 5. Finish level 4. A couple of the other coffees we've had have just had a longer, more lasting finish than this coffee. This one could justify a level 5 to so many people, but I think I'm a little bit more comfortable leaving it at a level 4. Body level 2, acidity level 3, and we were harping on the acidity early in this cup of coffee, but the acidity did die down a little bit, especially at the cooler temperatures. It's not quite as pronounced, so level 3 looks pretty good for the acidity, and stone fruit at a level 4. Yeah, I could definitely see that. There's a fair bit of these darker sort of stone fruits, probably thinking plums as we're sipping on this coffee. But for the most part, yeah, you get a little bit of everything else. I think a lot of the others, the extras in this, like a bit of the smokiness, a bit of the savoriness, all of this stuff, the saltiness could die down a little bit as this coffee has developed and as it has cooled down. So those things, when we were making the tasting wheel, make sense, but not necessarily as we're drinking it today is it as prominent and pronounced as it was when we made the tasting wheel. So this is an ever-changing tasting wheel. This is one of those that would look different on different days, but for the most part, this is about as accurate as it had been throughout the life of drinking this coffee. All right, our overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, really impressed actually. So given we had such high expectations, well, we had kind of middle expectations because we do like Manhattan a little bit more than we like Corvus, and this is definitely going to be more developed than the Manhattan coffee. So it's just going to be kind of interesting, but I think the bottom line is we just absolutely love Panamanian Geishas. So regardless of kind of who does this Panamanian Geisha, it's going to be pretty good, but we don't want to take any credit away from Corvus because they still did an outstanding job with this cup of coffee. I feel like there's a lot of layering, complexity, and depth to this cup of coffee, and while it's not going to be to the same standard that we enjoyed the Manhattan, which was very, very much in line with our flavor profile, it very, very much had a lot of those fruity pebble characteristics as we described in that coffee specifically. This one's skewed a little bit more towards the citrus, which is a little less our flavor profile. But that being said, the coffee was done in such a nice way that the flavors that aren't necessarily our flavor profile were extremely enjoyable throughout drinking this cup of coffee. So just because it's a little less our taste, shouldn't take away from how much we enjoyed the coffee and how good the coffee actually was. So massive props to Corvus for this coffee. Between the four of these coffees, Manhattan's Zorro and Estrebi and Corvus's Zorro and Estrebi, this one's our least favorite, but even with it being our least favorite, it was still a really, really impressive cup of coffee on the higher end of coffees that we had this year. That's just the standard that these Panamanian Geishas set for themselves. Amazing cups of coffee. So this is a limited edition run. This was only 150 tins, I believe, between the two of them. So as a result, they're no longer offering it on their website, and they won't be offering it on their website anymore. So we could suggest this to somebody, but I think the thing we're going to say is a lot of people have been curious if Corvus's higher end offerings are worth it, as some people have had mixed experiences with their higher end offerings. I think this does go to show that Corvus can do an amazing job with their higher end offerings as well, as I felt that this one justified the price, and it was a really, really good cup of coffee from Corvus as well. So we're going to kind of skip to who we would suggest this cup of coffee to, because this coffee no longer is available to purchase, but we're going to say that if you're kind of curious about Corvus's higher end offerings, if it is something that is going to be your flavor profile, something that you think you're going to enjoy, then we say it's probably worth pulling the trigger, as they did a great job of this coffee, and I was actually quite impressed with it, even if it's not going to be Manhattan, but that bar was set ridiculously high and something that is near impossible to reach. But I think we're going to leave this at that, as we still have the Estrebi review to go. So if you have by chance had an opportunity to get to this tin as well, then we would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well, especially your thoughts and impressions of Corvus, as it can be a little bit mixed from time to time, but for the most part, they're generally positive experiences. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. But this right here has been a review of the Zorro Natural Processed Panamanian Geisha from Corvus Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.